Here we go. Countdown. No, okay, we're ready. So thanks everybody for coming today to the third Mental Health Teams Lunch and Learn. Today, as you can see, we're going to be talking about engaging parents and guardians and how we do that in our programming. When I created this slideshow, I was thinking primarily about camp because I know that that's kind of the focus everyone is gearing towards now. But the things that I talk about today can be used for any of the programming. It can be used for SAC Aftercare, ECLC, any of the branch programming, like any of the sports programming or enrichment classes. But there might be one or two slides or comments about camp because, like I said, that's what I was thinking about. But for the most part, it can be used for everything. Okay, so today's focus, like I said, we're going to talk about establishing relationships with parents and caregivers, and we're going to really look at why we want to do that and how the best practices to do that. We're going to talk about modeling good communication strategies and challenging ourselves to consider the relationship with the parents as a partnership, like through good times and bad times. We're working together to create a partnership. So first off, why is good communication so important? Well, it's one of the most powerful tools that we have in our toolbox. And what makes it even more powerful is that it's free. It's simple. Anyone can do it with a little bit of practice and just thinking about it. It really helps inform and reassure and engage families, which helps build trust. Which is really needed when you're trying to meet goals with children or with families. So one of the things that I was thinking about is how to start the good communication even before. So here it talks about before camp, but again, this could be used anywhere. If there's the opportunity to reach out to the families before camp starts, I know that's not always that easy or accessible, but if that is the possibility, reaching out to them to welcome them, it's a great opportunity to learn more about the child because lots of times, especially with camps and enrichment programs, families might not fill the applications out completely or in detail. So these early, brief, friendly conversations could provide you with some more information so that you get to know the family, their culture, their expectations, right? If it could be the first time the child is away at camp, or maybe they really want the child to become a strong swimmer or something like that. So it's important to kind of start that even before it all begins, the programming begins. And then once you're at camp or programming or SAC or ECLC, all the interactions that we have should really start off positive, engaging in friendly conversation, right? Because what you're doing is obviously laying the foundation so that they're familiar with you and comfortable with you, so that if and when a challenging conversation needs to be had, you've already, established some sort of foundation with them. And, being able to create this foundation during programming is just like everyday check-ins, anything we should know, how we're, what is there anything that we need to be prepared to learn about the child before, for the day of camp or what they might be going through. So just really laying the groundwork before and then throughout the programming is key. So how we share information really matters too. And there's a few things that I was thinking about that are really important to highlight in how we share our information. The first one being the timing to communicate, right? We see our families a little bit in the morning for drop off or in the afternoon, drop off time or pickup, and it's not a lot of time. So if we come at the parents when we need to have a more difficult conversation where they're not prepared, they might not have time, and they're a little caught off guard, that conversation won't be as effective, right? So if there's a way to communicate with the families beforehand, this happened today, shooting them a text or an email, when can we schedule a time to sit and talk about this so that they feel prepared, they can talk to their student to see what happened, just to get information so that the conversation could be more effective. So once you've planned the time, right, you're going to be meeting with the parent, then it's really important to consider how you're going to have the conversation. Like, who's going to be part of the conversation? Will it be the staff member that had the interaction with the student? Is it just the supervisor? So that's really important to plan for that. And then while you're planning the conversation, I always consider role playing a really good exercise in having challenging conversations, because you're able to get information out, get feedback on how you sound or the things that you said, make sure that what you're saying is clear and concise. So planning that, making that time to do some role playing is really key. And then, how we share the information regarding that partnership that I spoke about earlier, even though it's challenging and it's difficult, it's still really important to consider seeing that conversation as a way that we can move forward together. It's not just, the problem that we're having or the problem that the family is having. We're creating more of a partnership again, like I said. So you've got the time, you've talked about, you're trying to plan the conversation. So these 6 items that I have here on the screen are really just some highlights on how you can have those challenging conversations, as you're planning and you're doing your role playing. So sticking to the facts is really important, right? The words that we choose matter. Don't be judgmental or dramatic about it or opinions about the situation that happened. Give clear examples of behavior, don't be vague, like put the facts out there that this is what happened so that there is a clear understanding of what happened or didn't happen, what the expectations are within the programming. So just sticking to the facts with that. Using the sandwich approach, right? Sometimes this doesn't happen as naturally in conversation. So that's why the role playing could be a really good way to practice this, where you start off with something positive, like, so-and-so did really well in arts and crafts today. They created this beautiful project, but then and then you go into what the challenge was or the difficulty was, and talk about it then, and then ending on a positive note, right? That something like, I'm glad that we talked and we can work through this together, that you're sure that, we can fix the situation or something like that. So using that sandwich approach is really helpful. Also remembering, that this is not about us, the situation. We have our reaction to it. We have our feelings about what might have happened in the situation. But what we're doing really is just trying to help a child that is struggling, right? Challenging behaviors are like signals that something's not right, and trying to figure out why that child is struggling. So, we really want to make sure that if we're level-headed and feeling good about, like our way of communicating, that sometimes the parents come at us upset or, frustrated or something. So not to take what they're giving out, as a challenge for us to react, but just understand that this is something that we're all just trying to help the child be successful. And then by doing that, you can explain, your plan, like the things that you might have done as a reaction to what had happened, something, if it worked or if it didn't work, communicating that with the families, because it's a great opportunity to collaborate with them, to see like what has worked elsewhere, or maybe what hasn't worked, what they've tried, if the child is in other programming or at school, just learning from their experiences what might have worked somewhere else. So collaborating, creating that partnership, it's really important to continue that during the conversation. And then, like I said earlier on this slide, ending on a positive note, really just trying to work together to have them feel positive and that we could work towards making improvements. So the other thought that I had was in terms of, beyond the bad news, right? There's more to the child, like recognizing that the tough moments that we have with our students are just that, just tough moments, right? If any of you have children of your own, you could recognize that sometimes your kids are not that easy to manage or deal with, right? Personally, but then there are times where they're wonderful and everything is, easier or better or whatever. Same thing with these children, right? So not to pigeonhole them into a certain category or feeling towards them, because there's more to it than just those tough moments. So giving yourself the space to see that, to appreciate the child, is really helpful. And one of the ways the mental health team recently has put forth the Kindness Project. I know we're doing it at the ECLCs and at some SAC sites, where staff will recognize when students are doing something really positive or kind to a peer or towards a staff member or just the community, and highlighting that and, acknowledging that to the student and then sharing that information with the family. And that's a great way, again, to see more than just the child in those tough moments, and a great way to share with the families that we see your child is more than just that. So really allowing that to happen is really key in creating that partnership and that working together. And then, the thought about role-playing scenarios, like I keep saying, I feel like that really is a great opportunity. You guys are going through some of your camp trainings and just staff trainings, and doing that as often as possible so that everyone can be comfortable with whatever kind of situations come up, whether it be with the child that's struggling in that moment or talking with the parents. It's really helpful to prepare. So here are just a few of the fundamental rules of listening, right, that you can follow along with when you're doing your role play and having those kinds of conversations with staff. The obvious, the making eye contact and acknowledging when speaking. The second one, let them complete what they say and then repeat it back to you. Then you repeat it back to them, I think is really important. I just know, in my relationships, I'll say something and then somebody will come back to me and I'm like, nope, that's not what I meant. So it's really important to be able to ensure that there's an understanding of what everyone is saying and thinking. Checking on people's feelings and emotional aspects, right? Asking open-ended questions, that's hard to practice. A lot of times we ask just a lot of yes/no questions. So working on that, like what concerns you most, what are you most afraid of, happening, or, things along those lines will help guide the conversation towards a solution or just better understanding. And then the part that we talked about earlier too is acknowledging the perspective of the person that you're talking to. You never know what's going on, what experiences they might have had, what they are dealing with their child, what struggles they might be having elsewhere and things along those lines. So having that kind of compassion and understanding for some of the challenges that might be happening there. And then finally, I've talked a lot about talking to parents about their challenging children. Sometimes it's challenging families that we deal with. And I feel that it's really important to address, right? So some of the ideas that I have here are, really answering the call. You'll get a text, you'll get an email from a parent. It could be multiple texts, multiple emails, and actually making the phone call. See, I go phone call, that's how old I am. Phone call is different than exchanging text messages, right? It really, it'll allow for that connection. So finding the time to do that is really important. But before you make that call, it's really important, if you're, upset about what had happened or feeling, frustrated by the family, the individual, making sure that you are calm before you make the call, that you have your thinking brain on, not the emotion brain, is really important. And again, role playing could be a really great way to do this, right? So you get all those frustrations and emotions out at that moment, so that when you do have that phone conversation or face-to-face, those feelings aren't as strong, right? You're just being able to stick with the facts there. And then, once you've done that, right, you've let that emotion kind of roll down your back and you've got your thinking brain on, really disarm them with your charm. Like, thank you so much for reaching out to me. I really appreciate this feedback. It kind of throws them off a little bit because they're expecting maybe you to come back at them with a denial or with a confrontation or whatever. But allowing them that space, thank you for taking the time to reach out to me. I think that really changes the tone of the conversation in a very easy way. So try to practice that with the role playing again. Showing interest in their concern, right? They are the expert of their child, right? They know their child best. So, listening to them and letting them talk. Thank you again, talking about asking questions, those open-ended questions, right? Showing interest in what they're saying, taking notes, right? Telling them that you kind of have the plan. Okay, I'm going to go back and talk to the counselor about this, and I'll get back to you, right? Just that you're not just, that there will be some follow-up there. And sticking to the topic. So a lot of times parents will call upset, frustrated, concerned, and they're talking in a way about staff or other students, right? And that can get upsetting to us, right? They're talking about our staff doing or not doing a certain thing. And it would be great if we can diffuse that, not feed into that. Like, just say, oh, that's really surprising. You know what, let me check in with my counselors about that and see, what they remember of that incident, or that does sound like an unkind behavior that a child would do to somebody. So let me just find out some more information for you. So just not feeding into that back and forth, just taking it and saying, I will do something with it, is really helpful. And then you kind of go back to the topic at hand. And then the final piece in dealing with the challenging families is really training and supporting your frontline staff, right? The younger staff that don't have much experience in dealing with those kind of phone calls or conversations, so that they can feel empowered to be able to handle that. And one of the suggestions, again, is the role playing, is the scenarios, is, just talking about it. So that, because as the director of a camp or a supervisor of a program, you really cannot answer every single phone call or something that comes in immediately. And if you can get your frontline staff to be able to kind of do the intake, if you will, like gather the information, ask the open-ended questions, not just be able to respond to what the concerns are. Again, it empowers them, which is wonderful for them, and it's wonderful for you, because then you can rely on others to kind of help. I mean, obviously, as the supervisor or director, you're making decisions and, consequences, if you will, if needed, but they're just being able to kind of help you along in those conversations. So that's it. That's my thing. Any questions or thoughts about the material that I put out there?
Hey, nice job, Jen.
Thank you.
The one concept of having some compassion, some empathy, it relates to a concept that we talk about. We haven't talked about it recently, but it was included a few years ago when we started to really focus on our member experience and member service. We talked about the idea of what's called the charitable assumption. You may have heard of it. And that is really helpful in terms of the mindset you have going into dealing with anybody, whether that's a professional interaction or a personal interaction. Like, I use it when, although I'm not on the front lines teaching classes anymore for the Y, but I am really engaged with my kids' activities. And yeah, there are times as a parent, I have to deal with other parents as a coach or a volunteer. And the charitable assumption really just is the mindset of like thinking the person you're dealing with is doing their best. And they have things going on in their life too, and they're trying to do their best. You're trying to do your best. It's just it's really is a helpful mindset. So that charitable assumption and that idea that you presented is really part of our culture. And I'm glad you brought it up, because I think that's something we need to talk more about as an organization.
Yeah.
In all the things that we're doing.
And it's hard because we have emotions tied into the conversations, the struggles, the way you've been treated by a student or talked to by a parent. And it's hard to be able to let that in, that charitable assumption, right? Sometimes. So yeah, it's key to be able to make that switch somehow, for sure. Thank you.
Hey, Jen, a couple things to add, in some cases, just reinforcing some of the things you said. I always like to, as a school administrator, as a principal, I always like to emphasize with my teachers, you recognize pretty early on who your difficult kids may be. And you want to start being proactive and investing in those emotional bank accounts with those kids, and find reasons to praise, especially with parents. Look for the smallest thing to be able to send an email or something, send some kind of praise, make a comment to the parent, make sure the kid knows you made it. So if you do have to deal with a difficult situation at some point, you've already established that you're there in that kid's corner, that you're a positive person, a positive influence, and you're not always just coming with these negative things.
Yeah.
And I used to tell them, put it on the calendar so that you remind yourself, you get that pop-up every day to say, hey, I need to find something in one of my challenging kids or an A kid today. I
Yeah.
need to make sure I send something positive home.
Yeah, that's great.
And then also to remind staff as they get frustrated with some of these things is, you know what, take a pause and remind yourself that they're kids and you're the paid professional. So don't stoop to their level. That's not what we do. And yes, there's going to be things that are difficult, things you don't want to deal with, but we don't go tit for tat with kids. You're the paid professional and they're the kid. And that goes a long way with staff. That's a pretty good reminder I found.
Definitely. Thank you. Yeah, that's great. I like adding it to the calendar. I always need a calendar reminder. That's great.
Can you just send that out to all my personal friends? Thanks.
Okay. So I know I spoke fast, ended early. But if there's no other questions, I guess we're done, Laura?
Sure, yeah, the gift of time. These are recorded, as I mentioned, so we'll get the post out. If you want to share this with your team, share this with your staff. And we can help troubleshoot these individual issues as they come up. We're happy to develop some scenarios to help you role play during your staff trainings, if that's helpful. Any role play we organize, I find you all have better examples. So maybe you create the scenarios and we'll come in and help with the response. But let us know if you need help with this. Thanks for making the time today.
Thanks,
you all.
everybody. Take care.